Hello, I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization. Today I'm speaking with Helga Zepp-LaRouche, the founder and chairman of the Schiller Institute. She commissioned a report which will be released this week by the Executive Intelligence Review on the Great Reset or Great Transformation and its relationship to the Green New Deal. This is a topic she knows very well, the policy of Malthusian population reduction, which was exposed in the late 1960s by her late husband, Lyndon LaRouche. This was the subject of an online conference from the Davos Billionaires, January 25th to 29th. Helga, why is this being so aggressively pushed right now?
The reality is that the entire transatlantic financial system is hopelessly bankrupt. They didn't do anything when the systemic crisis erupted in 2008 other than massive quantitative easing, money pumping, and now the bubble is about to burst. And this is a whole trick. The Great Reset and the Green New Deal means they want to inject $30 trillion for a next and final bubble in which only those who participate in the speculation, i.e., the billionaires, would become rich and the mass of the population would be impoverished. This is not workable.
Now, they call this a financial regime change. What do they mean by that?
Well, no longer are governments and parliaments supposed to make legislation which decides, how things are arranged, but they want to have a green dictatorship whereby it is the central banks who decide how much meat you can eat, if any at all, how much travel you can do with what kind of car or e-car or whatever. Uh, this will mean an eco dictatorship which will make any previous dictatorships look like a picnic.
Now, when your husband first took this on in 1971, he described it as a Shaktian corporate policy. What does that have to do? What's the importance of Shaktianism?
Well, it's a form of self cannibalization of the labor force. I mean, the problem is that if you replace coal and fossil fuels, you don't go to nuclear, you are only relying on so called renewable green technologies and energy sources, then you go to a very low energy flux density, which means you cannot maintain modern industrial nations. So this will be an attack on the living standard as we have never seen it. And it means genocide for the developing countries because, as people know, we have a pandemic which is out of control. We have a famine of biblical dimensions, as the head of the World Food Program, David Beasley, is warning again and again. So if you destroy the industrial capacities of the so-called industrial countries by doing this, you leave the third world, in a catastrophe. So you call for the four horsemen of the apocalypse: hunger, disease, pestilence, and war, and that will lead to a gigantic depopulation. And that is the essence of what Schacht was all about, because his policy ended in the concentration camps. And that is, in a different way, what we are looking at today.
Well, you have called this the new fascism. What is the distinction then between Shaktianism from the 30s and 40s and what you mean by new fascism today?
Well, just because it doesn't have all the aspects of the old fascism of Mussolini, Franco, Hitler, and so forth, if you impose that kind of a reduction of the living standard and you go to energy flux densities, which will mean blackouts, it will mean a collapse of industry. The effect is the same. So, one should not look at the label, one should look at the effect of these policies, which are a complete destruction of the labor force.
And you just published an article in the last day on the danger of a nuclear war. How is this related to the Great Reset?
Well, the situation is such that you have an unbelievable anti-China, anti-Russia campaign already, mainly because China is rising, Asia is rising, and there is an effort by certain oligarchical forces in the West to contain that rise. Now, if you destroy the Western economies, if you deindustrialize Europe, the United States, and possibly other countries who go along, then you will get in an unavoidable conflict with China and Russia, who are not. They may pay lip service to the green agenda, but China is pursuing clean, modern coal plants, nuclear fission plants. They have a very ambitious program for thermonuclear fusion, where they are practically ahead in the world. So, the geopolitical opposition is already saying, like Admiral Charles Richard, the head of the US Strategic Command, is already saying that a nuclear war is likely, and that the Pentagon has to shift from the idea that a war is not likely to that it's very likely. I mean, if you put all of these things together, I think this policy inevitably would lead to World War III.
Now, in spite of all this, in the last few days, you've expressed a certain amount of opposition that this can be defeated. What's the basis for your, I'm sorry, a certain amount of optimism. What's the basis for your optimism?
Well, I think that these policies become so blatant that there are people starting to discuss it. And I think the only way to defeat it is get the word out as far as possible what is behind these policies. Make sure everybody knows that, for example, in 2009 at the Copenhagen Climate Summit, the G77 countries and the non-aligned movement, they said they will not sign on to such a suicide pact. I'm absolutely sure that Russia and China are very aware of what is the intention of these policies. So the more people, industrialists, heads of SMEs, Mittelstand, entrepreneurs, trade unions, the more people discuss that and understand that there is an alternative to that, to impose the four laws of LaRouche, a global Glass-Steagall policy, national banks in every country, combine these national banks to a new Bretton Woods credit system, exactly as Franklin D. Roosevelt intended it, and then go for a massive industrialization of Africa and the Middle East, which urgently needs that. And then we can change this. And, I think more and more people inside the United States and in Europe will understand that it is in their best interest to not go along with this policy.
Well, and given this international potential, what happens in the United States is key. So, what should our viewers do to make sure we defeat the Great Reset and the Green New Deal?
As I said, get the news about what is behind this out as far as you can. Get your friends, your acquaintances, your colleagues familiar with this. Make sure your congressman, your other elected officials, your mayor, your city council, that they all know about that, because it will come down to the elected officials to impose this policy, and that will bring them into an absolutely incredible conflict with their conscience and with the interest of the people they are supposed to represent.
Well, Helga, thank you for your insights on this and for your work in getting this report out. It's coming out this week in the upcoming issue of the Executive Intelligence Review, and shortly afterwards will be a smaller section of it in a pamphlet distributed by the LaRouche organization. So Helga, thank you, and I'll see you soon.
Till soon.